story begins in the summer of 1949, when a middle-aged school inspector from Egypt arrived at the small town of Greeley in Colorado. His name was Sayyid Qutb. Qutb had been sent to the US to study its educational system, and he enrolled in the local state college. His photographs appear in the college yearbook. But Qutb was destined to become much more than a school inspector. Out of his experiences of America that summer, Qutb was going to develop a powerful set of ideas that would directly inspire those who flew the planes on the attack of September the 11th. As he had travelled across the country, Qutb had become increasingly disenchanted with America. The very things that on the surface made the country look prosperous and happy, Qutb saw as signs of an inner corruption and decay.
Americans lived these isolated lives surrounded by their lawns. They lusted after material goods. And this, says Qutb quite succinctly, is the taste of America.
What Qutb believed he was seeing was a hidden and dangerous reality underneath the surface of ordinary American life. One summer night he went to a dance at a local church hall. He later wrote that what he saw that night crystallized his vision.
He talks about how the pastor played on the gramophone one of the big band hits of the day, Baby It's Cold Outside. He dimmed the lights so as to create a dreamy romantic effect. And then Qutb says that chests met chests, arms circled waists, and the hall was full of lust and love.
I've got to go away.
But baby, it's cold outside.
This evening has
Been hoping that you'd drop.
For most people watching this dance, it would have been an innocent picture of youthful happiness. But Qutb saw something else. The dancers in front of him were tragic lost souls. They believed that they were free, but in reality, they were trapped by their own selfish and greedy desires. American society was not going forward. It was taking people backwards. They were becoming isolated beings, driven by primitive animal forces. Such creatures, Qutb believed, could corrode the very bonds that held society together. And he became determined that night to prevent this culture of selfish individualism taking over his own country. In 1950, Sayyid Qutb travelled back to Egypt from America. He too was determined to find some way of controlling the forces of selfish individualism. And as he travelled, he began to envisage a new type of society. It would have all the modern benefits of Western science and technology, but a more political Islam would have a central role to play in keeping individualism in check. It would provide a moral framework that would stop people's selfish desires from overwhelming them.
I got sprays that jingle, jangle, jingle as I go.
But Qutb realized that American culture was already spreading to Egypt, trapping the masses in its seductive dream.
Here's to Thomas Lindsay Wolcott.
What was needed, he believed, was an elite, a vanguard, who could see through these illusions of freedom, just as he had in America, and who would then lead the masses to realize the higher truth.
The masses need to be led, and it is this vanguard group that will be responsible for the task of leading the people out of the darkness into the light of Islam. Because the masses had succumbed to their own selfish desires, and he wanted the vanguard to be different, to be pure, to be standing together outside of all of this corrupt situation. Bringing people back to the truth.
On his return, Qutb became politically active in Egypt. He joined a group called the Muslim Brotherhood, who wanted Islam to play a major role in the governing of Egyptian society. And in 1952, the Brotherhood supported the revolution led by General Nasser that overthrew the last remnants of British rule. But Nasser very quickly made it clear that the new Egypt was going to be a secular society that emulated Western models. He quickly forged an alliance with America. and the CIA came to Egypt to organize security agencies for the new regime. Faced with this, the Muslim Brotherhood began to organize against Nasser. And in 1954, Qutb and other leading members of the Brotherhood were arrested by the security services. What then happened to Qutb was going to have consequences for the whole world. In the 1970s, this film was made that showed what happened in Nasser's main prison in the 50s and 60s. It was based on the testimony of survivors. Torturers who had been trained by the CIA unleashed an orgy of violence against the Muslim Brotherhood members accused of plotting to overthrow Nasser. At one point, Qutb was covered with animal fat and locked in a cell with dogs trained to attack humans. Inside the cell, he had a heart attack. Qutb survived, but the torture had a powerful, radicalizing effect on his ideas. Up to this point, he had believed that the Western secular ideas simply created the selfishness and the isolation he had seen in the United States. But the torture, he believed, showed that this culture also unleashed the most brutal and barbarous aspects of human beings. Qutb began to have an apocalyptic vision of a disease that was spreading from the West throughout the world. He called it Jahiliyyah, a state of barbarous ignorance. And what made it so terrifying and insidious was that people didn't realize that they were infected. They believed that they were free and that their politicians were taking them forward to a new world, when in fact they were regressing to a barbarous age.
The sense is that Jahiliyyah is so dangerous now because it not only is advanced by Western powers, but Muslims, this is like a charge of false consciousness, Muslims have become infected with this Jahiliyyah, so now the threat to Islam is also from within. It's from without and within. It's the state of emergency because Jahiliyyah is a condition that pervades everything and everybody. It's even infected our powers of imagination. We don't even know that we're sick, that we now worship materialism and the self and individual truths over the real truths. So it's an incredible sense of epic confrontation where Islam is being insulted on all fronts, from within, from without, culturally, militarily, economically, politically. And under those circumstances, any way of fighting it becomes justified and legitimate. And in fact has a kind of existential weight because somehow it's doing God's will on earth.
To Qutb, this force of Jahiliyyah had now gone so deep into the minds of Muslims that a dramatic way had to be found to free them. In a series of books he wrote secretly in prison, which were then smuggled out, Qutb called upon a revolutionary vanguard to rise up and overthrow the leaders who had allowed Jahiliyyah to infect their country. The implication was that these leaders could justifiably be killed because they had become so corrupted they were no longer Muslims, even though they said they were. Faced with this, Nasser decided to crush Qutb and his ideas, and in 1966, Qutb was put on trial for treason. This is the only known film of Qutb as he awaits sentence. The verdict was a foregone conclusion, and on August the 29th, 1966, Qutb was executed. But his ideas lived on. The day after his execution, a young schoolboy set up a secret group. He hoped that it would one day become the vanguard that Qutb had called for. His name was Ayman Zawahiri, and Zawahiri was to become the mentor to Osama bin Laden.